All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a fairly short period of time this afternoon, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. So first and foremost, can everyone hear me in the back? Can I get away without using the microphone? Okay, fantastic. That would really raise the level of intensity in this room. My name is John Reardon. I'm with Harvest Technology Group. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the next generation of document management for PowerSchool districts. This room, I can just tell by a lot of the faces that I know already, is a real broad mix of student, human resources, and finance personnel. Also, we've got some current clients, some prospective clients, and some people who've never seen or heard of Harvest before. So with that really broad mix of participants, I'm going to try and cover as much as I can, as sequentially as I can, so it makes sense for everybody. But these vendor sessions are designed to be really high level, almost appetizer type views into what we do. If you like some of the things you're seeing here, or if you have detailed questions, if you want to engage us on at a more deeper level to see this solution, I would encourage you to stop by our booth or just fill out one of the forms that Greg's passing out, and we'll be happy to reach out and schedule a webinar for you. We can go into more detail about this. But we're going to talk about next generation of content management with Content360. As an organization, I've been working personally with PowerSchool districts from the SNUG side all the way back to the Penimation side, going back 20 years. And in that time, we've developed a fairly unique set of views into the challenges that K-12 school districts find around document management and information management. And it's no secret that school districts generally run on paper, and if they're not running on paper, they're running on forms, right? There's forms for everything in K-12 school districts. So we're going to talk about how we can provide maybe a more elegant approach to managing that. And part of that comes, and this is, my marketing department really loves whatever visual tools they're using here, but it actually does a pretty good job of describing some of the information we've seen as we've been talking to all of these districts across the country. Every school district is on somewhat of a paperless journey. I've never been to a board meeting where they said we've got a goal to increase the amount of paper we're going to print by 100,000 pages this year. It's not happening. You're actually going the opposite direction. But as these school districts move through what we're considering the paperless journey, they all generally take some form or fashion of this path. They start with paper. They move to what I'm going to call a disparate scanning, and that could be someone in the human resources department buying a scanner or using the multifunction device just to store documents in a shared drive somewhere. They will then move into more of a departmental scanning. So maybe the entire department sees this individual, what they're doing, and they move into, the entire department goes into a paperless approach. They will then move into district-wide scanning and finally into e-forms and workflow, ultimately achieving the paperless objective. Just kidding. I've never seen a school district actually go all the way paperless, but we can take steps to get there. So the journey itself is not unique, and it's really not that interesting, but some of the insights that we've gained around the journey, I think, are. I'm not going to go through this entire list, but I'm going to focus on 3 specific pieces of this. One is that every district is on this journey, okay? Whether you know it or not, whether you are intentionally on this journey or not, your district is moving paperless, right? And it could be at an individual level or departmental level. The fact that you are moving forward, it helps to have a plan and to have a partner that can help take you there. Now, when we start talking about some of the approaches that districts have taken to go paperless, we see a lot of different ideas and a lot of different levels at which these districts are moving. Almost all of them and almost every approach is going to involve some level of technology. Right? It could be the attachment functionality in Finance Plus. It could be Docs Online. It could be eSchool attachments. It could be, again, a shared drive somewhere in your network. The technology approach really isn't the key, but it can help you get started. Oops. Excuse me, that's probably me. But using the wrong technology approach can actually inhibit your growth along the path, right? So it's great to start with using attachments. It's great to start with scanning. It's great to start with local approaches, but eventually you're going to start bumping into the edges of what that technology offers you, and that's where we come in, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into, again, a lot of background about this, but it's important for you to have an understanding of where we're coming from and why we think an enterprise district approach to document management is important. We've been working with PowerSchool for quite some time. We've recently renewed our partnership. We are an ISP partner with PowerSchool. That provides us with this insight. Now, for those of you that are currently familiar with Content360, you may have heard that we were based or built on top of SharePoint. Again, this is kind of a broad audience, so for those of you that have never heard us about this before, won't be relevant. But for those of you who have or are current clients, this past year we've made a shift off of the SharePoint platform onto a platform that will better support the overall initiative of the paperless journey I was just talking about. That platform is a product called OnBase. It is truly an enterprise class solution to help districts go paperless and really expands functionality into some of the more advanced areas, especially in e-forms and workflow, as we're going to talk about in just a minute. Why did we select OnBase? It's in use by 20,000 organizations all over the world. It's a tremendous platform, as I mentioned earlier, and it really, the number one reason is it helps support the clients with the paperless journey, but also from a PowerSchool perspective, all the integrations that we've built using the SharePoint version of Content360 are now applicable and they're basically the same thing from an OnBase perspective. So we're not decreasing or deprecating any functionality, and in fact, we're greatly expanding the portfolio of what you can do moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll show you what we mean by that specifically. So the first thing that everyone asked, or what everyone liked about Content360, was the ability to access documents from any screen inside PowerSchool applications. So I'm just, again, for sake of brevity, I'm going to show this using eSchool Plus. I'm in an eSchool Plus screen. I want to see documents related to this student. I click on the integration button. I'm now seeing the list of all the documents that I have security access to that are related to that individual. Security is generally role-based. If you want to talk about security at a deeper level, we can take that conversation offline. I learned yesterday when I brought this topic up, we spent 15 minutes talking about security. And so we'll take that conversation offline, but I'm more than happy to talk about how we're able to secure documents. Once I have the documents displayed, I can simply select the document that I'm looking for, and that will drive me direct to that document. So again, the first level of integration is the ability to quickly access documents from directly inside my PowerSchool screens. Any questions about that piece? Okay, fantastic. All right. So the second method of document retrieval, and this is in the Content360 Powered by OnBase solution, this is what we call a homepage, okay? This is literally a series, and it's customizable by user, of panels that tell me the most common places I go to access information inside of Content360 Powered by OnBase. So when I go into the document search window, or I can search up here to search for documents, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into how documents are organized in our solution. So at the highest level, we have what we call document type groups, right? These are your departments. So in the old Content360, or when Content360 based on SharePoint, these were sites. Now we're just going to organize documents and contents by each department. When I select an individual document type group, I see all of the document types. So here are all of the accounts payable documents that I have access to. When I select the individual document type, I'm going to get a list of all the index values I can search by. Now, I can also select multiple document types, and as you'll see, as I select multiple document types, my list of keywords is being removed or limited down to only the keywords that are addressable by all of those documents, or across those document types. When I run my search criteria, this is going to be a pretty broad search. I get the list of documents. Double-clicking on the document opens up. And then I have a lot of other options available to me. So I can add notes to the document. When I right-click on the document, I see an entire list of options. I'm just going to go through some of the quick common ones. I can view the keywords, which are all the index values. So you can see those over here. I can make modifications, again, assuming I have the appropriate security privileges. I can also go through and take a look at the document history. So this is a list of everything that's happened to this document since it's entered the solution, even being so granular. I'm not sure if you can see in the back that it showed that I've used the keywords 2 minutes ago, right? So it literally is tracking everything that happens to this document as soon as it enters the system. Any questions about that? Okay, just some of the quick common functionality for what we can do from accessing documents. Now the second view or access into documents I'm going to show you is what we call the file cabinet view. Those of you that are in human resources, those of you that are interested in digital student cumulative folders, I think this is a very useful way to access documents. And the reason being is because it takes the same criteria I was looking at before and it breaks it down into a more traditional file folder view. So like a Windows tree structure, if you think about it in that capacity. So here I'm looking at an individual employee's file. If I click on the file view, you can show me all the employees that I have access to. So if I look at Mr. Andrew Lincoln's file, it's going to then take it down into the subfolder where I can see I've got a couple of other subfolders here. That in and of itself, okay, great. But what's interesting is I can also find out what documents are missing. So what am I expecting to see in this employee's file that's not there? What am I expecting to see in a student's folder that's not there? And then I can run reports to see how I'm stacking up across the district with documents I'm expecting to see. Also, when I set retention schedules, so retention is one of the big areas that school districts generally don't consider when they start to go paperless, right? It's not really a joke, but it kind of is. The default retention schedule for school districts is yes. Right? Do I store this? Yes. How long? Yes. Can I find it? Maybe. But at any rate, so based upon how I'm structuring that information, that's going to help me set retention schedules and live up to my retention policies across these documents. So any questions about that view? One other thing I'll point out, I didn't have to go in and configure Andrew Lincoln folder and then the subfolders, and then drop and drag and file and save things there. Those are added dynamically as I add documents. If I add Greg Manning and I scan in a resume for him, his name will automatically pop up and be a folder, and Content360 will automatically sort the rest of the documents into the appropriate folders and apply the retention schedules against them.
Presumably the document types and the required document, all that's customizable, I would assume, for and absolutely. Is this an installed application or is this a web-based?
It can be. What I'm showing here, so the question is it installed or web-based? I'm showing the thin client. It's not a thin client. It's a click once deployment client, but there's a full web plate, a full web client as well. Great question. And it can be on premise or in the cloud, depending on where you want to host it or not. Great questions. Okay, let's take real quick and talk about how we're getting documents into the system. So the same methods of document import that we talked about from a Content360 on SharePoint perspective work. So anything that I am printing out of my PowerSchool applications or other applications are automatically scanned, stored, and indexed into Content360 and OnBase. If I have to do a manual import process, it looks something like this. And obviously I don't have a scanner attached to my computer, but I just want to show you what that looks like. So I'll just use the manual import. If I can click on the right button here. And I'll use a student document here. So I can just drop and drag documents into the software. I can also set it up to automatically import documents. So this is a student service document. It's a proof of residence. And the same integration works as well, just by typing in a single data element. Should have picked a smaller one. By tabbing off of that student ID or off of that key field, I'm automatically populating the rest of the key fields based upon data that I've accessed via my PowerSchool applications or some other data source. Does that make sense? So when I grab documents and I import them into the software, I'm generally only going to key one or two pieces of information to have them fully indexed into the software. Any questions about that piece in the back there?
If you're using
Great question. Okay, so the question is, it's all about PowerSchool registration integration. So we've actually written a module that does PowerSchool registration integration. Since I'm sort of here already, I'll just talk about this very quickly. So if I'm using PowerSchool registration, I have the option or the ability to go in and to download two different types of forms. One is what I'm going to consider like a registration document. These are the forms that are filled out in PowerSchool registration by the parents. The second type of document is what's been uploaded by the parents during the registration process. So currently, the first type of documents, which are the PowerSchool forms, that is a manual download process. Now, you can drop them into a directory and download them, but it's something you have to do manually. The second type of documents, for now, it's manual. We're in discussions. The second type of documents are the parent documents that are uploaded into PowerSchool registration. Those we can set up a scheduled task to download into Content360. The download process looks something like this. So I get my students, they're organized into a file folder with the student ID. And if I were to open those up, it displays for me, sorry, move that over, the student ID and the content type. So those are the two pieces of information we really need in order to grab that information and put it into Content360 powered by OnBase immediately with no additional human interaction. Does that make sense? Now, this happens from a registration perspective after the registration process is generally closed. And generally closed for a couple of weeks or months, whenever you want to run that process. Okay? What's cool about that then is that gives us the kernel or the genesis for the student cumulative folder. Right, so this is generally that during that registration process, that's the first time I'm capturing information. You may also have this set up if you're using PowerSchool registration in your district. If you're not using PowerSchool registration, this is a manual process. People are coming in, we can set up a scanner right next to the registrar. They just scan the documents, hand it back to the parents, and away we go. Great question. And I was going to get into that later, but since we brought it up and we're on import, no, that's perfect timing, perfect timing. Okay, any questions about this part so far? This is kind of the blocking and tackling, if you will, of document management. So this is scan, store, retrieve type stuff. What we're going to move into next is how do I deal with all of the other pieces of paper that are coming into our district? And these are forms. They generally take the forms, things that our parents are dropping off, you know, all of the more random type pieces where I'm not directly using my PowerSchool application to manage that process. So inside of, I'm going to cancel this out. Inside our solution, one of the best things about running Content360 powered by OnBase is our ability to manage and work with forms. The forms technology I'm going to show you, and I'm going to go actually into the form designer because it makes the form look kind of ugly, but I want to show you what's behind this. So this is truly a drop and drag kind of WYSIWYG form designer that you can develop forms with in a matter of minutes. I mean, it is very, very intuitive. If I want to add text boxes or multi-line checkboxes or radio buttons or panels or grids or repeating sections, images, even signature boxes to forms, it's literally a matter of dropping and dragging it to where I want it. And that functionality is then added to the form. Every element on here also has what I'm going to consider to be properties, where I can go in and make those properties to be related to other data content. So I'm going to show you in a minute what that looks like. So I can just key in a single data element and have other elements populate automatically onto the form. I can add an attachment box where someone can click that and upload additional forms. And when they're imported back into our solution, they're all indexed according to the information on the form. Right, so I can do a lot of this, and all of this is, again, drop and drag. Now, that's not to say that I can just go willy-nilly and start dropping and dragging information on there. If you want to do that, use Word or use PDF. This is actually actionable data. So you can then take that and pull it from other data sources, or I can then take that information and use it to determine what to do with this form once it's entered back into our solution. So Just a couple things I'm going to point out. There are a lot of sections to this form. So there's a management approval section. This is a multi-page form. There's actually 3 different pages. So I can go over here and take a look at what those individual sections look like. Now, I will tell you this form is going to win no awards or points on style. That's not the point of this exercise right now. But when I go, one of the cool things I can do is once I've developed this and designed this, I can take it for a test drive. So let me see what the users are going to see when they access this document. And so from here, I can say, all right, well, that signature box I added is truly in the wrong place, but we'll just go through here. So when I type in that employee ID, am I getting additional information to populate? Are my drop-down lists in the right place? Are they in the right order? And what I'm tracking, is it working correctly? Is the current date populating? Is the logic that I built in saying that in this travel request, if I'm gone overnight, it's going to automatically pop up the hotel section for me to fill out? So that's some of the logic I can use. But one of the funny things about this is, or interesting things, is that if you'll remember, this is a 3-page form, but I'm only seeing 2 pages here. If I go to select the HR manager and then refresh, I'm now going to see what the manager sees. So now this is a 3-tab form instead of a 2-tab form. And the management approval section is viable, and I can go in and sign that document and test the general rest of the functionality. So, this is not something that you consider when you kind of sit down just to design forms, right? What are they going to look like to all of the people in the district? Can I make my forms actionable based upon the information, or dynamic based upon the information in the form itself? These are all things that I can set up, and the logic behind it is I don't know how else to say it, but it's something I can do, right? That's about as simple as I can make it out to be. Okay, when I'm finished with my form design, everything looks good, I can publish it. And I'm not going to publish this one, but then I can also share this form out as an XML file so it can be rapidly embedded into my website or to my intranet site or even on mobile devices if I wanted to share it that way.
You have things like these forms, and I see your intranet employee unit populates. Is that data? Is that a data connection to, for example, Business Plus, or is it data that's housed within this solution?
It depends. It depends on if you're hosted. Sometimes we have access to the information, sometimes we don't. But the data can be an external data source, so or it can reside in our solution. It's up to you. So when I go, like for an example, like budget codes, it's not activated here, but that's something that would obviously go from Finance Plus. If you have like the purpose of travel, that may be data that just resides in the form itself.
If you were to build a fancy looking form, can you embed it in other web pages and things, or provide a link to it, or is it just?
No, literally you can embed the form inside of the web pages. It's XML on the back end. So that's about as far as I can go technically and how that works, but I'll be happy to schedule a conversation with someone who knows more than I do. That won't be hard. Anybody any other questions? Okay, fantastic. So forms, here I go with my document management humor. Forms in school districts are kind of like potato chips. You never have just one. But what happens to the form when it's created, right? So instead of having this form kick off a lot of other form processes, generally what we will do is run it into Content360 workflow. And workflow, I won't spend a lot of time on this other than to say that from a workflow perspective, our workflow is developed into individual steps. So what are the steps in my workflow process? And then we will assign rights to those steps based upon who has that responsibility. Each individual step inside workflow has what we call system work associated with it. So if I can make any decisions, but if I can make decisions about the data, about the form, based upon the dollar amount, based upon who submitted it, based upon the department, based upon the type of trip it is, or any other piece of information, that can determine where I'm going to route the form. It also can determine whether or not I'm going to accept it or reject it out of hand and request additional information. So we want the information flowing through our district to be as accurate as possible. And if it's not accurate, we want the people who are actually submitting it to do the fixing instead of me having to pick up the phone and making a lot of phone calls or emails back and forth. So part of the workflow process is also notifications. So if at any point in time a document has sat inside a workflow, and so I'll show you kind of what that looks like. As part of the document history, I showed you this earlier, I can see when it enters and exits any workflow step. So if a document enters at a certain point but doesn't exit by the time we're expecting it to, we're going to send out notifications. Hey, this invoice has been sitting in your approval queue for 2 days. You need to take some action on it. I don't hear anything in 24 more hours. I'm going to email the supervisor or maybe another employee. Okay. Also, from a workflow design perspective, the steps are laid out graphically, and the logic in the workflow is based upon a series of if-then statements where I can go through and determine at any step, what do I need to be looking at to make the right decision? What other documents do I need to show the user at this step in the workflow so they can make an informed decision? And it's I'm not writing code to have to, or to build these workflows. This is all point-and-click configurable. You do obviously have to be a logical thinker, right? So you need to understand what the process is and what my decision criteria is, but all of that is built inside of our workflow. Also, each individual step and all the elements I'm using here are completely reusable. And if I have 15 people in a workflow, I'm not building 15 steps. I'm building one step and just giving people access to it. So that's about a 5-minute overview of some of the most comprehensive technology we have. Any questions in that regard?
What actions does this workflow do? You obviously said email and approvals.
Sure.
What other things?
There are 150 predetermined actions. So everything from checking to see if a keyword exists, checking to see if a date exists, checking to see if other documents exist before I move it. I mean, I can show you the list. It's pretty intensive.
It sounds like you can maybe decide based on what's in the document what category it should fall.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Does it have any ability to write back to a PowerSchool application?
And we have the ability to write out any data inside of our system into delimited files. If we can pick it up and use the API from PowerSchool, we can absolutely do that as well. Yep. So, questions about what we do with this information. I mean, all this information you're collecting in these e-forms, a lot of times is valid information. So we can write it back out to a delimited file and upload it, or in some cases we can use the API, assuming the API exists bidirectionally. So I actually have access to all the fields that I want to import into PowerSchool. We can use that as well. So, great question. No, I'm done. That's it. That's time, right? All right. Any other questions? We've got 1 more minute.
As you've worked with something like this with new districts, do you have a process by which you go and digitize existing documents they have?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So the question is about my existing documents. What do I do with the Indiana Jones warehouse full of 100-year-old student records? The answer is it really depends. I will be very candid. Very few school districts have the budget or the patience to go back through and do a backscanning initiative. Most school districts in any process will start with a day forward approach. So they'll say, for the 2021 school district, those documents are going to be in digital. If it was created before then, it's going to be manual. That's not to say that we can't. We absolutely can.
Is there any, I'm trying to phrase this, but as a student moves from district to district, if they're both on this platform, is there a way to transfer those records in a cohesive way?
Yep, there is. It's going to get into probably deeper water than I can travel comfortably technically. But yeah, so the question is, as students move from districts to districts, is there a way to transfer the information? If they're outside of your district, we can certainly use the solution to build kind of a digital file, if you will, that you can forward to the other district. If they move in between campuses in your district, we can set up campuses as a security keyword and then poll eSchool to find out which campus they're associated to, and then lock down security based upon that campus. It is more difficult, and I don't even want to bring this up because it's probably a level of difficulty that we don't want to get in. But if I want to turn this on for teachers and have only students that are rostered to my individual class, we've done it. It's not something we recommend. It takes dozens of years and costs thousands of lives, but we can do it. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. If you haven't filled out the registration, yeah, please do so. And this session was recorded. I will send a link to it to all the people that I have the registration forms for. So if something I said you don't remember, if you want to show it to someone else in your district, you're happy to do so. Thank you all very much.